This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome everybody. A lot of new face or some new faces or new names, I should say, no faces, but names, and some returning people. If you're new here, I'm Tommy. We have Chris Myers and Chris Lacasio from support here to help answer any of your questions and discuss the fun topic of material setting or material testing today. And then he disappears. Wow. So we'll, unless anybody has some questions to start off with, we'll jump into the slideshow, and I will try to make this as painful as possible. Oh, that should have been painless. Sorry. So let me share screen. There we go. So wire material inside some of the topics that we'll hit today. Some of the questions that we'll answer are wire material test important. What are the parameters being tested? What do they tell us? How do we do them? And stuff about variables. The variables will play a factor into just about everything we touch. We've got some photos in there of different material test cards and material testing and how we do it. And then we also have a little bit of discussion on our methods, or I should say, Silo's methods of testing for samples. So wire material test important? Well, obviously, it allows us to do, the biggest reason is determining our settings, whether it's speed, power, lines per inch, whatever settings that we're trying to test. That's what we're trying to determine. By doing the material testing, we're allowing for accuracy and repeatability, which then turns into building our own personalized material library. I know I don't like relying on somebody else's work because of the variables that I know or the variables that I don't know. So by doing all of this, it allows us to take and create that material library specific to our needs or your needs, or however you want me to phrase that. We get to see how the material reacts to the laser being tested. It's too much power, too much speed, or not enough speed, too many lines per inch, the Q pulse isn't right, the frequency. We get to see, how each of the material starts to react to the lasers. It also helps us understand pre-processing and post-processing. Do we have raw material, or do we have clear-coated material? Do we have to clear-coat it afterwards? Is it just a tumbler? What do we need to do to clean it off? And then when you start getting into a little bit more detail, material testing helps us identify our kerf size and if our scale is correct on the X and Y axis. So what are the parameters? Well, as I go through here, if y'all got any questions, there's a little button to raise your hand, or you can put it in the chat if you'd like to, and one of us will hopefully see it. So the parameters being tested. So for the Novas and the Bolts, we're looking at speed, power, lines per inch, and then some of the additional things we're looking for air, how much air, or where we've turned the pin valves. If you have a digital gauge, then what's your air pressure being read there. But more specifically on the bolt, we're also looking at the frequency. Please correct me if I'm wrong. It's what, 1 to 25 kilohertz on the bolt?
Yes, on the bolt with the bolt basic, yes, correct.
And then when you start getting into the bolt pros,
I believe it's 1 to 200. That would go through the coherence, and if you have any questions, I have a whole frequency layout with the parameters built into the bottom of the informational chart. But yeah, I believe it's one. No, I know it's 1 to 25 for the original bolt with the 30 watt. The 40 watt, I believe, is 1 to 200.
Okay. For
I
the
can,
Aurora, what's that, Chris? Sorry.
I can, I'll look at it right now and I'll put it in the chat.
Excuse me. So for the Aurora Light or the Aurora 8 fiber, we're looking at speed, power, frequency, and then lines per inch. Are some of the variables that, or some of the parameters that we're looking to test. Um, the Aurora 8 UV and the Aurora 8 MOPA. So it's at the 100 watt, or we have a 60 watt MOPA, correct? Or is it just 100 watt?
Sorry.
That's okay.
We started limiting our offering, and Chris, maybe you know better than I do. Um, it should be the 50 and the 100, but I think we're only starting to carry the 100 for the MOPA, the
Okay.
light, and the UV. So we should have 3 available, correct?
Yeah, you should still have, I think, a 50 watt.
That's the Aurora 8.
Yeah, then you got the light, which is also 50 watts. Maybe they scrapped the other one. And then the 100 watt MOPA and the
Okay.
UV.
So with the UV and the MOPA, again, we're looking at speed, power, and frequency. We're also looking at the lines per inch, and now we're adding in Q pulse. So when you're trying to figure out these parameters, and I know I was taught pretty much speed and power we keep them generally the same, what we're wanting to test, and then we change the frequency and the Q pulse, or we change one once we get somewhere close to what settings that we want. We start altering the lines per inch or testing for lines per inch to see if we can get a different outcome on the material.
Yeah, on the fiber testing, there's just so many variables that you have to pick a static one, and usually it's two. You know, say you're going to run 20% power and 1,000 millimeters per second, but then you have your variables, which would be frequency and Q poles. And then you just create different tests with different powers and speeds. This way, there's not so many different factors confusing the situation. Sorry, Tommy.
No, 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 no. That's what you're here for. Uh, so now, also, when we look at these parameters, we need to look at doing these for each lens. If you're running the Novas or the Bolts, each lens is also going to give you a little bit different of an outcome, and the lens will kind of go along with your lines per inch as well. So it's not just limited to, I did one with the 35-100. Here's my 3 mil Baltic birch plywood material test. It's okay. Are you using a 2-inch lens? Are did you want to try to do it with a 1.5, or you want to test your engraving with a 1.5? You have, for some reason, that you may want to use a 4-inch because of like a bowl or something. So you have to be able to test those with the different lenses to get your different settings, because each lens is going to change how a graphic looks when it's engraved on a specific material, and we've seen that over and over again. Um, Same
There's
thing. Go ahead, Chris.
there's one more thing to consider on some of these tests is focus, especially
Well,
on the galvos.
that was my next one here is you're also testing on different focal lengths or distances. Um, if you run a ramp test and you find, let's say, 5 is your optimal focus, that's fantastic. Well, let's run a test and see what 6 millimeters look like or 7 millimeters look like. That way, as we start diffusing the beam, we're going to get that variation in the material so that we see what that difference is. Especially, if you go from I don't know, let's say wood, and then you want to engrave a tumbler, you need to make the dot size a little bit bigger by defocusing, but you still need to see what that looks like. So you run a material test. On the Auroras or the Galvos, you need to do the same thing on each lens. I have noticed that is a massive difference in results when you start changing out lenses, and then let's start changing out focal distances and keeping accurate notes. Was this result with a 1 millimeter or 3 millimeter plus on your focus? So keeping accurate notes. I've got this horrible little notebook that has about everything I've ever done on either the UV or the fiber, and on both fibers, so that I can look back and remember what exactly I did. I wish Lightburn Material Library would give you a note section. Maybe one day.
You got to
Okay,
submit it to
Tommy, I
them.
got a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, hey, are most of these like line interval? That is more for like engraving, right? That's not for actually red line cutting. It's more for like scoring or whatever. I call it the blue. I run red, blue, and black.
Yeah.
So
So
Okay.
red is cut,
Yep.
black is kind of like outline, and then blue is filling in between the two lines, or etching, or whatever you want to call it, where you're actually just burning the wood away. We all know that. But anyways, on a line, if I want to cut out a piece of wood, I want to make a 1 inch by 1 inch square. The lines per inch, they're not going to have anything to do with that, right? This is just mainly for etching the blue line,
correct.
line, correct?
Yeah, correct. Well, yeah, for you, it's the blue line. It's for, whatever people use for that layer, but it's a fill. So
That's it, the fill layer. Okay.
yeah, so the fill layer is going left to right, right to left, laying down a line and filling that. Let's just use 1 inch. We're putting 300 lines in that 1 inch to fill it. So we can put more, we can put less. Sometimes you can have a gap between those lines depending on what that number's at. And then each lens would have a perfect, depending on the focus, a perfect LPI to fill that line to line or edge to edge. And that should be your fastest way to do it.
Right, correct.
And then you
Okay.
can start to overlap too. Like on painted tumblers, I exceed the actual focus, so I can kind of strip that paint away and make sure it's clean.
Okay, yeah, question answered. I'm making sure that we're on fill and not cut line or score line. All right, go ahead, continue. I'm sorry. I'll put my hand down now.
But one other thing to consider is if you're cutting into or scoring is minimax power, especially if you're going into sharp corners to alleviate either burn through or bigger gaps.
Correct. You want the min power to be a little bit less than the max, so that when the gantry or when the laser changes directions, or whether it's a curve or a 90-degree corner, that you're not roasting those edges with too much power as the head slows down.
And two interesting facts with the Lightburn test. One, going back to what you mentioned, Tommy, is you can put a title, and you can try to, at least in a limited section, put the title to explain what you were trying to do.
Right.
But notes would be wonderful to put in with those tests. Also, for cuts and taking into account your min and max, you may want to run different shapes than just a small 2 millimeter square. You may want to run an arch. You may want to run a 45 and a 90-degree angle so that you can see. Now, the Nova series is known for being able to compensate for that. You can adjust, but the Bolt series does not consider that yet.
Yes.
What doesn't the Bolt series consider? Because I have definitely seen an effect using min-max power when scoring.
Myers?
Yep. So at least in the initial firmware, the Bolt series does not actually reduce power when you get below the 10 millimeters per second threshold.
Maybe I wasn't below 10.
Well, yeah, and anytime you're doing a corner or tight geometry, you're basically going to drop below. Even if your set speed, and a lot of people running this, oh, I've got it running 1,000 millimeters per second, and I'm engraving quarter-inch tall text. I'm scoring this text. Like, no, you're not. Like, that's too small. So you're already going slow. But even on, like, say, something ornamental size, whenever it gets to the tight curves and sharp corners, you're having to slow down, right? It's physics. There's kinematics involved, and you must slow down to make a hard left turn. But yeah, from what we've seen, it does not. Now we've got this March firmware, and we've got a newer firmware that we're still testing that we can also verify, see if we can get that feature back, because we like the feature, even on your RF tubes, to be able to reduce that power in the corner so you get less of a thermal insult in that area.
Okay. Any other questions? Sweet. Okay, so what do they tell us? Well, they tell us how the laser reacts to the material. They tell us what settings to use to achieve our desired results. How much post-processing needs to be done to complete it. Which lens to use, what focal distance, and how much air is necessary. And that, I don't know. I've played with the air so much running test cards and whatnot to see the difference in, okay, let's use a very little bit of air. Let's keep adding air, and how does it change? Just because I may tell you to, use barely little air, it doesn't hurt for you to test yourself and go, okay, well, I don't like barely little. I like just a little bit more than that, or what, I like it wide open, for whatever reason. And then you got and I tried to find a great picture. When you talk about post processing, when you start getting all this char, that's all stuff you've either got to wipe off or sand off. So when you start looking at your results, the more power, the more residue. So you want to try to find something that's kind of gives you a happy color, gives you a good depth, but doesn't make you work so hard at the end to clean it up and make it look pretty. So how do we do them? Well, we run a material test on each piece of material. What I call the railroad track test, it's designed by Thunder for all of our machines, and that's this photo here. If you look at it, to me, it looks like railroad tracks. Wonderful little test, and it's got, when you open up the file, it's got about every parameter there that you can just kind of move out of the way or delete what you don't want. So the man behind this one did a pretty good job of creating it. The engrave looks very similar. If I remember correctly, we just happened to use this one cutting. You have the legacy material test. I like that one for Novas, but it's not very accurate for the cutting. And I will agree with CeeLo on this. When you talk about learning cutting shapes, this shape right here at the bottom is a fantastic shape to practice to cut someone, because you're changing directions and you're making the head slow down to do this corner or to get in here, and then you're seeing what the results look like when they're in that tight corner or when it goes around a curve. And then your light burn generated material tests. I do not like them personally for the Novas and the Bolts, but for the Galvos, they work fantastic. Once you figure out how and which settings that you want or which parameters that you want to test, they do a fantastic job. Any questions on these? Now, variables. And yes, using the photo here, you can do material tests on cups. It doesn't have to be a true material test. it can just be rectangles. With your variation of power, this one specifically was done with the bolt and altering the beam expander and looking at from 0 to plus and minus 5 to see what the results were going to do on this. But your variables are tube life. Just because I tell you that, you know, for a 51-130, you need to run 500 millimeters a second to engrave with, you know, 40% power. Well, my tube's 3 years old. If you've got a brand new one, you may get, you know, good results at 20% power. So you got to take into account tube life when we're talking about, you know, variables and settings and material testing.
This is a good test too throughout the years of the tube. So when you get your machine, you initially do a test to see where you're at with the tube. You know, how potent is this tube? And then 2 years down the road, you start to say, oh wow, I'm starting to have to increase my power a little bit. Well, then we can run another test and see how much fadeaway of power you have, and you can make the adjustments. So it's huge to have these two comparisons or multiple comparisons down the road.
Absolutely. Even batches of material. We'll run material tests on, you know, I'll grab plywood from Home Depot or Menards or wherever, and then okay, well, if something's not right here, let's run another material test to see, you know, is it the material, is it our machine, or what exactly is going on. Your LPSU output, as time goes on, it, you know, it starts to dwindle and the output might not be there. It may be enough to run what you need, but not like it was when it was brand new. I know our 51 130, the LPSU is starting to go. You know, when we can see that in some of the results that we get, that it's not putting out what it used to put out. Temperature of materials and your environment. This is one variable that's extremely hard to control. Moisture contents of wood, whether it's kiln dried or air dried, how many years it's been air dried, what percentage. I haven't, one of these days I will dig into the difference in an engrave versus a 5% versus 8% moisture content on something. But for the galvos, your temperature of your metals or your materials. If you're wanting to try to pull, you know, colors out of the MOPA, then your temperature of material may play a factor in that. And recreating that's going to be a nightmare. Your humidity could be a factor. So, you know, just take those into account that, you know, temperature of your materials and your environment do play a factor with, you know, testing in your settings. If there's a finish on it or masking, whether it's the acrylic or wood, you're trying to get through just enough. So that's one extra layer that, you know, okay, well, I just did my material test on a 1/2 inch or a 1/4 of an inch, you know, oak plywood, and it cut it this. Well, you put masking over it. Those settings may not work because that masking is interfering with your cuts or your engrave. So you know it wasn't as deep as you expected it to be. So you have to do a second pass. Finishes, polyurethane lacquer, how thick they are. I've seen, you know, a thick, heavy coat of lacquer or polyurethane, and it's a nightmare to get through at times. Or it doesn't. Go ahead.
I mean, just masking, and if you're doing an engraving, can change your entire world if you don't butt them up together. If you start overlapping, you're going to have peaks and valleys of everywhere
Yep.
that is overlapped. Ask me how I know. It's horrible, and there's like no way to fix it because now, you know, you have different levels of the material. But yeah, I mean, just that small little bit makes a huge difference. It's a different type of material. There's a glue there. So yeah, all of those finishes and maskings can change settings greatly.
Exactly. And your optics. If your optics are brand new, they're going to react one way. If they're 3 years old and still look good, they're still going to react differently than when they were brand new. If they haven't been cleaned, we replaced the part of the head on a machine today, and the mirror was nasty. And we'd cleaned the mirror, but until you pull it out, you don't realize you couldn't see the fingerprint on it, or you couldn't see some of the residue that was still on it. Um, so optics play a variable in any of these settings, or material testing, I should say. So some of the different material test cards. We've already seen what the railroad track one looks like. These are what the legacy ones look like here in the center of it. The circle is kind of deceiving. Yes, it cut out, but is it the best one in the world to use? You have the ones generated here by Lightburn. And you can see here, when you're testing, well, I kind of goofed that one up and made it a little too hot, or a little too slow. Same way on this one and some of the other ones. The metal business card over here, I ran a test and got it a little too hot. And the test is on the opposite side of it, so the back side of it turned all kinds of colors because there was too much heat, because I hit the wrong settings. Once I get a rough area of where I'm wanting to shoot for, then I just start making little 5 or 10 millimeter squares, and then running specific settings to try to get those squares to do what I want, or to see if this one's 20%, then okay, well, let's add make it 30% power, or 40% power, or whatever, so I can see it, what the differences are. So there's a variety of ways to do material testing. It doesn't just have to be specific to the test, or to either the legacy test that we have, or the railroad track one, or the one generated by Lightburn. Now, sample testing. Chris, I'm gonna let you hit this one up, because you do most of our sample testing.
Absolutely. So it's a service that we offer for people that are looking for a new machine. Um, Basically, you send us in samples, and we will run some various tests on it to make sure that it does what you need it to do. Um, it's designed to show that it is capable. I have a whole bunch of tests that I just did, like those, to test to make sure that I can get colors and kind of the result that they're looking for, the contrast that this company is looking for. And it's not designed to create a product for you. It's not designed to work out your workflow or find the fastest solution. I'm making sure that the material will interact with the laser, and it will be able to do what you want. For the most part, we get you in the ballpark, and then you can adjust for speeds and powers to get into your workflow where you need to be. Let's see, what else did you put on there? Yeah, exactly. If you have questions,
It shows the machine's capabilities.
correct.
Again, like you said, we're not testing to find the fastest. We're testing that that the laser will engrave, or will mark, or will cut whatever material you're asking.
Right, and there's a lot of things. There's new materials coming out. There's stuff that we haven't touched. There's stuff that you shouldn't put on a laser, and we will do some testing. I have a great facility here I have excessive fans and exhausts where, I don't mind seeing if it'll work. But yeah, we're not helping you figure out your workflow. We're not helping you figure out, the amount of production hours and units you can complete. um, we're giving you a ballpark and we're showing you what the machine can do.
But now when it comes to the material libraries and material testing and that factor, all we're trying to do is give people a starting point. It's not the end all be all guaranteed, because there's no notes. There's no talk about focal distances. There's no talk about temperatures or environmental factors or any of those other variables that play. It's just to give you an idea. If in the material library it says to cut at 10 millimeters a second with 30% max power and 25% min power, it's for you to work that. Is it a 2-inch lens or the 4-inch lens? Okay, well, that's a 1/2 inch material, so obviously that's the 4-inch lens. A little deductive reasoning helps as well, but it gets you in the ballpark. And that was for whatever machine that was being tested on.
Right.
So you can use that and go, okay, well, if that was running on a 130 watt machine, then there's a little math involved. So I know I could probably do it on a 100 watt machine, but I'm just going to have to change a few things.
And a lot of the time, since I do a lot of the material library building, the result is what I'm going for. It is not the speed. But as we look at some of those tests, we can cross-reference and see, all right, well, I can get the same exact result at a faster. I usually the goal is I want to go as fast as possible with the least amount of power. I'm trying to be as productive and with as little tube loss or gas loss as possible. So I'm trying to balance that best result with that when I build these libraries. But I'm also testing in Florida, in humidity, even though I'm air conditioned. The power that comes into my building, I'm running 122 volts right now. Yours might be 110. So all of these factors, including material, play a role.
Exactly. So conclusion, in my opinion, and whether it's right or wrong, material testing is probably the most important thing that can ever be accomplished. It provides with the repeatability. It provides you with your settings. It provides you with all the knowledge that you need to do what you need to do with your laser. They are time consuming. Good Lord, are they time consuming? I know, CeeLo, you've spent hours upon hours testing. I know that we've spent hours, or I can't say we. I've spent hours upon hours sitting there and running tests over and over again, sometimes beating my head into a wall because I know it should work or I think it should work, but something in the variable is not clicking for me to try. Again, when you start doing these testing, keep accurate notes. Like I said, I keep a notebook. That way I know what I've tried. I know what works. I know what doesn't work. Or, because I'm not a spring chicken anymore. My memory's starting to go. So I got to write it down. And use the test to label your results. And use your test to build your material library. My material library is going to be different than Sam's. Is going to be different than somebody else's. So build your library based on your machine and the products that you're able to get your hands on. Any questions? Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to turn my camera on. There we go.
That's okay.
Let's see if it shows up. But I do my tumblers a little bit different. I don't do squares. I take a part of the design and I try it at different things because if I have something like this with a lot of surface area, that's pretty easy to get done. But when I get one that's thin lines, I
Yes.
do part of the design, and that helps me get my power and speed down much easier than doing just a square test. It's a little bit different than what most people do, but for me, especially when I do designs with thin lines on them, it helps me make sure I'm getting everything from the top to the bottom as best I can. So just a
Oh,
little bit different,
absolutely.
but
That's really smart. That's great. I'll have to remember that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer into material testing. It's whatever meets your needs.
yeah, it helped me on my bolt to get what I wanted and clean it because I did one for the white cup and I have one for the black cup. you know,
Hmm.
I use different power settings for that.
And Tom, you bring up a good point. You can't be afraid to waste material.
Yep.
So you need an
Yeah,
extra one, even if a client is bringing you something. You say you have to provide me with one extra or two extra, whatever you're comfortable with, so that you can give them the best result.
yeah. I didn't mind. I wasted more than these two, but it was a
Yeah, we all
system I
do.
had to come up with to come up with good power and speed, and it worked really well for me once I got it settled in.
Well, and when you look at material testing, so here lately, I've been doing a lot with the fiber, the 100-watt MOPA to try to dial in my plastic settings for like PLA. I haven't gotten to the PETG for the stuff that we 3D print. Um, but the different colors react differently. The Even the different brands. I think what Chris Myers, you said that you get good results on one specific black PLA, wasn't it?
Yeah, the Elegoo black PLA gives me the best.
And I haven't, I think we've got that same stuff, but like my black Polymaker PLA, I can't wait to be able to sit them side by side and see that comparison. Okay, what is the difference between the Elegoo PLA and the Polymaker PLA, and do the same settings, yield the same results? Can I just melt through them all really easy with the wrong settings?
To Tom's
Mm.
point on the material test card and not being able to translate necessarily the engraving blocks to what a text or a fine line would look like, I label all of my test cards labels with what was used to make those labels so that I can see for the text that describes it's 20% power, whatever happens to be, what was used so I can see what it translates to in comparison to the block.
There's also a feature in Lightburn in the not text to path, but the variable text, where you can create a line of text that will grab all of the settings and it will engrave it under or over or wherever you put the text onto your test.
Ooh, I
Good
like that.
point. I like that.
Yeah, you have to look it up because obviously they have, it's Y, comma, L for lines per inch. You can have a uppercase and a lowercase for if you want it written a certain way. So it's intricate, but it's worth knowing.
Any other questions on material testing? Any other questions on any other topics? Since we got no
Yeah,
questions on material testing, we'll move on to other topics.
Nobody's got questions.
Outstanding. That's what I'm talking about.
I got one, but it's not laser related.
Sure. What you got?
You saw the bamboo announcements.
Yeah, I did.
I didn't.
It looks I might be slightly excited.
For those that don't know, Bamboo is a 3D printer.
Yeah. Hopefully, it's a larger format with that dual head. And Chris will be buying. I already posted my other ones up on Marketplace.
I saw. I won't sell my other ones, but I'll buy the new one.
Yeah.
Send me one.
Yeah, for
I
a
don't
small
know
fee,
that.
I will.
I don't know that either one of us like you enough to send you one.
Wow.
Yeah, I had to go there. Sorry. Uh,
We'll
Ouch.
send him that one that just sits there and takes up space.
yes.
If he pays shipping.
Man, you
Oh,
guys.
the Neptune?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the floor is open to anybody else that's got a question, whether on any of the anything that you need. That's what the three of us are here for today, is to help anybody out.
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
So I haven't looked into it yet, but I have a project I'm working on that has an image that is wrapped around with some raster engraving. And the only way I see to do it at the moment, and I could be just doing it wrong, is it engraves the image, then it goes back and engraves the lines around it, the raster around it. Is there any way to have it do both at the same time so I don't have to scan it twice?
You can create it all as a bitmap. You can use Lightburn's preview, or you can save it as a bitmap.
Okay.
This way, it does the line as well. Otherwise, no, there's no way to make two lines or two layers go at the same time.
Is there any way to do a fill that isn't a complete fill? So I'd love to be able to have a fill option in which I can say this fill is going to be 80% and then apply a halftone or a dither or something to it.
I mean, I guess you could. I'm trying to understand exactly what you're trying to do.
So the like the newsprint halftone type
Yep.
look, right? Sometimes I want that look.
Right.
And the only way I can really see to do it is to apply it to an image.
Yes. Yeah, that would be the only way. Really, you would have to dither that solid bar or graphic.
Well, you could take. So this is one where you're using Lightburn to its fullest, right? Lightburn will let you output the processed image, and then you could then take that processed image into your other software and then add your text or whatever that you want to engrave as normal text, combine it all into one, then throw it back into Lightburn and engrave as pass through, because you've already applied dithering to one section and no dithering to the other, and it's just a pass through at that point. If that's what you're going for.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah. Yeah, Lightburn, for the amount of stuff that Lightburn allows, like the processing and exporting of things is crazy, because like the folks over at the vinyl cutter brands, the Silhouettes of the world, and the Crickets and the Glowforges, no, they're going to monetize all that. You got to buy different tiers. I mean, I don't know, there's like 8 tiers of Silhouette software. Oh, well, you can get SVGs imported on this tier, but if you want to export them after you modified it, that's another tier. But Lightburn basically says, we got it, you want to export it, go for it, and you can do a ton of processing inside of Lightburn and then use that elsewhere.
So I guess that's a good question. That so in a CNC machine, right? I know these particular controllers aren't using G code, but in a CNC machine, if I have my application that's generating the G code, I save that G code because you never know what the parent application is eventually going to do to create a different version of that G code if you go to modifying something later on. In Lightburn, if I have a project and I send that project to the laser, I don't know quite what it's sending it. I can't seem to see anything but a bit file or a binary file. But is there any time that Lightburn is going to change the structure of what it sends from, say, one version to the next.
Yeah, I mean, if you have optimization settings or anything that changes it when you update, but you can save the RD file,
Yeah.
which is going to be similar to your G code file, and you can keep that as your base copy because that packages up, whatever settings you have. So, being in tech support, a lot of times we want to see people's project files, but that doesn't always tell you the everything because if they have different optimization settings or curve tolerances in their Lightburn, when we open it up, it basically ignores their stuff and it's what we have because that's our development environment. Whereas if it's an RD file and you go to run that on your machine, it'll have their offsets in, which will be close, but that's more of the output from
Okay.
Lightburn.
Good to know.
So, yeah, there's
Thanks.
some nuances in there. But yeah, if you change something in your project environment, of course that will change your output, which a lot of times people forget. And when they update, there's like the options for cut selected, use selection origin, optimization settings, offsets. They just don't re-enter some of that stuff, or they don't click it, and things stop running the way they expected. But the file on the machine is unaffected. If you use the send button and send it to the machine, that file is unaffected by whatever you do in the project until you send it and overwrite.
Yeah.
Any more questions out there?
I want to
I
show
had a
you my
text
screw off
question.
that I
Sorry.
did. Oh, I don't
What
make.
you got, Tom?
I've been doing this for 2 years, 3 years, and I haven't made very many mistakes. So I did this one. It came out pretty good, not bad, and I decided I'm going to make it bigger. Unfortunately, when I made it bigger, I had to change it to the eclipse of the moon instead of the moon because it elongated it. I should have shortened it up to about here to keep it round. And I didn't catch it until I put it all together. So Tommy, don't worry about. Wait till you get to be 73 like me, then you can make more mistakes.
Oh, I make mistakes every day. I won't lie about that.
But that was one I looked at and went, "Oh shit." You know?
Yep.
So-
Done that a couple times.
Yeah, so I did.
Or
that
especially
one's
when
gonna.
you're. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That one's gonna. This is gonna be a round moon, and that's going to be the red moon eclipse.
Very nice.
I mean, when you look at it too, I mean, and it's kind of comical when we do it all the time with tumblers.
Yeah.
You get that, okay, well, we're we've done the same thing, or we know that you have to change the shape and whatnot of a circle so that it engraves like a circle instead of
Yep.
like an egg. And we do it all the time, but it's always that first cup. It's like, damn, did we really not adjust that when we,
It's when we actually remember to test it on some blue painter's tape first. But inevitably, thankfully, we now have a decent supply of tumblers for when we make those mess ups. Yeah. Like
Oh,
that
I love
time
making.
I didn't check my settings and I ran every tumbler that we had and then cleaned them. Don't do that. Run one, clean it. I messed
Oh,
them
that was
all
miserable.
up. We had to order more from China, which of course takes a long time. That was great. Explaining that one to the customer.
Oh, that's like the danger of the frequency on the bolt. I changed it to do something and it came out great, and then I went to do something else and it was coming out crappy, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out what I did. I never went back and changed the frequency back to where it should have been at 20 kilohertz. So that's one thing I have to remember is little sticky note. Check frequency.
I've done that when I'm working on certain projects before. I have left sticky notes on the controller or right in front of me at the computer or whatever, reminding me to do certain things, flip my material over or make sure that the air is whatever setting or whatever, because inevitably I'll forget.
Well, we just did it the other day because she works on one computer, I'll work on another computer. She'll design something up, save it. Well, 9 times out of 10, her settings based on the layer color is different than what I'm using. So when she saves it, I just pull it up. It's purple. Woohoo! That's ready for the fiber. And that's where I almost burnt through a stainless steel business card because I should not have been going at that speed to try to do what I was doing. Because I didn't pay attention. I saw it was purple. I had just been doing stainless steel, figured, I didn't need to look at that. It was the same color. I'm good. Yeah, mistake. So I learn every day. I think it's great.
The thing I like about the material library is that you can have unlimited things in there. And I'll go so far as to, if I'm doing something that I'm going to add masking to that I don't normally do, I'll create a new entry for that and call it masking. So I can make sure I select the right ones. It'd just be nice to know if there was a label to understand what was applied. But you can't. You just have to go look at what's the settings currently applied are.
Mm-hmm. And Sam, to answer your question, I guess there's a new Bamboo 3D printer.
Okay, cool. Sorry. I can hear you guys. I just had you muted.
No, yeah.
Oh, it's all good, Sam.
The new printer might even have a laser in it. That's some of the speculation.
Oh, Lord.
But I think it goes back to some of the functions they use to measure the burst layer and all that stuff. But to me, the dual head switching is going to be a game changer for Bamboo, because now I can do multicolor TPU. I can do polycarbonate with supports, because polycarbonate, typically, if you try to do that with supports, it just gums up and the incoming material just clogs the nozzle. So, yeah, a lot easier.
I bet you it'll save time too, instead of having to retract all the way out. And granted, changing 4 colors may be a little bit still time consuming if that's what it's going to do, or if it's just a 2-color version. I think a 2-color version would be fantastic.
Well, think about this too. So if a lot of my prints are PTG with PLA supporting each other, so I never really have to retract, right? It's just those two and a little bit. But say I was going to a 3rd color, well, say color 1 swaps to color 2, and now we're printing on 2. Well, guess what? You can retract color 1 and put in color 3 while the other one's running. So you save all that time, because with the Bamboos, every color change, if you're printing 1 object or 20 objects, is just about the same amount of time. So
yes,
so, you fill the bed up, and we're, this is an 1.5 hour print, to I just put 12 times as many, and now it's an hour and 57 minutes. So
yes,
that's going to be huge.
It's like doing those multicolored dragons. You're talking about 12, 14 hour prints, and it's because of all the color changes.
Yep.
All the customers, when they come over and they see this, they're like, "Oh my gosh, why didn't you guys post that for sale? What's going on?" And I'm like, they made this one for me because it takes so much time. The cost is going to be insane, and nobody's going to want to pay for it. So this one's special. This one's mine. Maybe next year we'll open it up, for a couple of people to order it. But this year it just wasn't worth it,
No, it's hard to justify that much money
for a plastic dragon.
Yeah, exactly.
There's always someone who will justify it, though.
Oh, I know.
True. And we do have some of those customers, and when they see something that they want it. So yeah.
That's how we sell chessboards.
Yes.
But again, as we start to wrap this up, we got a few more minutes. If anybody else has any other questions or comments, please let us know. and before I forget, thank y'all all for joining us. I know we're all grateful. It's nice to have, I don't want to say have an audience, but, Go ahead, Sam.
So put a ridiculously stupid price on it, and when you sell it, Tommy be the good husband and make Lois another one.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, Tristan would be the good son and make his mom another one because
Yes.
Not like it's any extra work out of you. Come on, man. The printer does the work.
yeah, it does.
It's just the time.
Yeah, the printer does the work, but you got to put in the right settings.
Yeah.
Oh, we already have the file saved. All I got to do is hit send.
Yeah.
Someone's got to dry the filament. Someone's got to load all the colors.
Drying filament's overrated.
Yeah.
I thought this was a
Well, we have it just for TPU right now, so.
Oh, my TPU is sitting right here. Look, it's on the back of printer number 3. Wide open. It's going to string no matter what. TPU is just, it's bad.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to go ahead and do this.